Hi, I'm David Kiron, Editorial Director of Research for MIT Sloan Management Review.
And I'm Liz Altman, Associate Professor of Management at the Manning School of Business, University of Massachusetts, Lowell.
And we're here to talk about workforce ecosystems and AI, two powerful trends influencing work and the workplace. Liz, it's awesome to see you in person again.
It's great to see you, as always.
So let's talk about two powerful trends that are influencing work, the workplace, and workers. Workforce ecosystems, which we've been working on for a long time, and this crazy excitement over AI that's influencing the same things.
So I'm going to take the opportunity very briefly to go back to our origin story, which I think is a great way to explain and represent what we're seeing in workforce ecosystems and AI.
I love this story. Go ahead.
Okay, so March 2020, I received an email from you saying, would you like to consider being guest editor for the future of the workforce? I did some homework, read some of the work that was being written and said, I think this is a mistake. This is about mostly human...
It was a mistake for you.
Mistake for us, I thought, at first, that this was about human resources and what happens inside an organization. It was very focused on inside of an organization. And so I said to you, I study platforms and ecosystems. I study how organizations, and not really individuals at the time, but really organizations work with other organizations to create value for companies and to do what they do. And then you, I think, very insightfully said, no, we think the future of work and the future of workforces is about these relationships and these intersections. And so that really launched the next 3-4 years of research of us thinking about organizations, individuals, partner organizations, complementers, so app providers, and also technologies, and how do they all come together to create today's much more complex, interconnected, extended workforce.
Yeah, and it was really exciting to find as we began the research to see that over 90% of managers believed that external contributors were part of their workforce. It wasn't just some made-up theory that we were doing. A lot of companies depended on external contributors to get the work done and create value for the organization.
And I was surprised as we spoke with leaders, CEOs, CHROs, and others about their organizations that they started to say, somewhere between 30 and 50% of their organizations are now external or contingent workers. So whereas before we've always had contractors, we've always had outsourcing, but we didn't have this trend where 50% of the contributors, and in some cases more, are actually external non-employees, right? So they're working with employees, you have this collaboration going on, but you really have a much more complex situation where the relationships matter and the interrelationships matter. But let's talk about technology.
The composition and the boundaries of the workforce had shifted for many of them, and that carried all kinds of management implications. And then when you throw in the rise of AI, we saw a lot of significant changes in not just the conduct of work, but how work was being designed, how workers were being supplied, and also how workers were being measured. So it was a much more far-reaching effect than what we hear oftentimes is, well, is AI going to automate jobs or not? And one of the things that we found was that it's a false narrative around AI that it will or it won't. That's not the right decision point. It's like, what would be an integrated perspective to look at how AI is actually influencing all these different dimensions of work? Let's talk about one example, just on the design of work and how AI is influencing that. We spoke with Novartis. You actually spoke with Novartis, their VP of HR, Marcus Graf. And we talked about all kinds of wonderful things they're doing in the organization. And that organization has 100,000 employees and over 50,000 external contributors. And he said at one point, one of our goals is to create a software tool that when somebody has a new work project, they press the button and it populates automatically what the skills are that's necessary, where the skills are in the organization, what skills you need externally, what the costs are, all these different variables.
One of the things that I think is great about the way Novartis is envisioning the use of these integrating, and they're integrating multiple systems, I think from multiple vendors and internally, right? They're working on integrating into a system such that it can help them with their decision-making and help them with trade-offs. So it can be very explicit about, if we follow this scenario of the workforce, if we have this many internal, this many external, we have this as a individual consultant, or however they set it up, they can very explicitly see what that means for them business-wise. And to me, that's an excellent way to think about how technology can help them as they continue to build and adjust their workforce.
Yeah, and they call it a talent intelligence. And they're trying to build the systems underlying that talent intelligence. And what I found cool was that it wasn't just like, here's this software app that will do all these things and AI is driving that. The different components that make up that system also have AI components. If you're going to be recruiting people into that work project, the recruitment process itself is going to involve AI. The verification of the skills is going to involve AI. There are just multiple levels of AI, and it's not just, can we create an algorithm to do that? You have to get the data in order. There are all kinds of systems integrations that needs to happen, and it's not just happening within HR, but it has to work with the procurement systems.
As we've been thinking about this and we talked to people about it, we realized, and we wrote about this in the piece we wrote for Brookings, right? We put together a framework and we said, okay, when we talk about workforce ecosystems and AI, we shouldn't jump to a conclusion. So in your case, you said we shouldn't jump to the conclusion that it's automating jobs or eliminating jobs. And I speak to people about platforms and labor platforms, talent marketplaces. And often when I say AI and workforce ecosystems, they presume we're talking about how do you use AI to find workers. So if you're an organization, to find workers, if you're an individual, how to find a job. But that's only one part of it, right? So that's, in our framework, that's under supplying workers. But there's also this question of how does one actually conduct the work, right? So when you're using these systems to get the work done. Novartis' system is probably more under the supplying workers, but we have other examples where they're using AI as part of the workforce.
To augment performance.
Right.
And in one of our other research streams, we found that it's not just about automation or augmentation. It's also about redefining what performance means in the organization using AI.
Well, which gets to our other conversation, which was about measurement and metrics and how they're changing as you now have the ability to use AI to help understand what the performance outcomes are and how they're changing over time.
There are all these social implications, societal implications of organizations across the industry spectrum, becoming more reliant on contingent workers, gig workers, contractors, and the like. Because when you don't have all the benefits that come from being a full-time worker, and there are a lot of policies and legislation that are focused on supporting those kinds of employment benefits, things are changing. And we know that some of the executives in the C-suite are concerned that this is going to have a destabilizing effect on the economies that they operate in.
And one of the things that was so interesting to me was to see the variation, right? So again, I think people tend to assume that all contractors, for example, want benefits. But it turns out that, yes, a lot of contractors want benefits, but many contractors actually don't want benefits. They'd rather have higher pay, just straight out compensation, and flexibility. And so understanding kind of where those assumptions are and how we can use technologies to get a better handle on that, I think is a whole other set of topics that's interesting and that we've found to be really interesting as we've interviewed various people.
Liz, this has been great. So awesome talking with you again in live.
David, always great to talk with you. Thank you so much for including me in this.
And we're going to be talking more about this content and this topic at Work 24 on May 2nd at the Work 24 Summit that's hosted by MIT SMR. Looking forward to it. Thank you.